I trust you've enjoyed this chapter I've entitled Making God's Truth Attractive. Actually, as I was preparing this video message, I was motivated once again to look more carefully at the scriptures that relate to my own life. You can review these scriptures on pages 81 and 82, where I ask you to use these scriptural exhortations as a checklist. It's simply a way for all of us to determine the degree of respectability we have with both Christians and non-Christians in our business lives, our social lives, and our church lives. Perhaps you've done that, but I'm suggesting that you go back as a group and consider these biblical directives. For example, what about your business life when measured by what Paul wrote to the Colossians? Whatever you do your work heartily, as for the Lord, rather than for men, knowing that from the Lord you will receive the reward of the inheritance. It is the Lord Christ whom you serve. What about your social life as measured by Paul's words in the same epistle? Conduct yourselves with wisdom toward outsiders. Make the most of the opportunity. Let your speech always be with grace, as though seasoned with salt, so that you'll know how you should respond to each person. What about your church life, as measured by Paul in his letter to the Philippians? Do nothing from selfishness or empty conceit, but with humility of mind. Regard one another as more important than yourselves. Do not merely look out for your own personal interests, but also for the interests of others. Before you review the other scriptures related to these areas in our lives, let me share two thoughts that came to mind while I was reflecting once again on these scriptures. First, I thought about what happened in Jerusalem when the first church came into existence. After Peter's message, about 3,000 people received Jesus as the true Messiah. But notice what happened to these believers as recorded in Acts chapter 2. They were continually devoting themselves to the apostles' teaching and to fellowship, to the breaking of bread and to prayer, praising God, and notice, having favor with all the people. In other words, as these new believers loved one another and demonstrated their oneness in Jesus Christ, those who were listening and watching developed a great sense of respect for these Christ followers. In other words, as a family of believers, they were kosmios, that is, respectable. Together, they were able to kosmeo, that is, to adorn the Word of God. Together, their lives were like cosmetics to the gospel. In other words, onlookers were attracted to the message of the Word of God that was touching their lives. And as we've read in the book of Acts, these believers were having favor with all the people. So once again, remember that reflecting these characteristics outlined by Paul in his letters to Timothy and Titus involves more than just what people see in our lives individually. It involves all of us, together, as Christ's body, reflecting Jesus' lifestyle. In this case, it's being respectable. That is, having favor with all those who know us as a group of believing men. Once again, have a great discussion. And don't forget, and this, of course, is a message to each one of you, be sure to set a goal, just one, that will help you be more respectable as a man of God. In fact, let me be a bit vulnerable. I just set a new goal as it relates to my home life. I'll give you a clue. It has to do with something my wife mentioned a few weeks ago. Maybe you can identify. It had to do with making sure the bathroom floor was dry after taking a shower. Well, in this regard, I know I can be a bit more kosmios. Well, we're all in process, aren't we? And will be until Jesus takes us home. Have a great study.